Hello everyone. So at the end of last week's video I said that I wasn't going to be posting anything for a little while, but after talking to Andrew Williams, a guy up in Ohio who watches our show every week, and I told him what I was going to be working on, he thought that would be something kind of cool that he would like to see, and maybe some other people would want to see as well, some of the things that I'm working on. So for Andrew up in Ohio, and my Aunt Catherine and Uncle Tommy in Pennsylvania, and my cousin Kathy who lives in Texas who watch every week, along with all the other students and everyone else, I'm going to continue posting every week on the things that I'm working on. This week it's a short video about the Cletrac crawler that I bought out in Kansas. It's only briefly of it going together and getting running again because I had already had it all pulled apart, because I don't worry about posting those things that I'm working on. Didn't think they'd be of any interest, but some people said that they would like to see it. So hopefully you enjoy these, and please keep up and follow along and email me with any questions that you might have. Thank you. So I'm working on that K20 that I bought out in Kansas over Christmas break. It ran fine, but when you push the clutch in, you couldn't get it to go into gear because the transmission input shaft wasn't slowing down or stopping. So took it apart and found a couple of very interesting things that I'll show you in a little bit. But trying to get this thing back together, get the engine back in place, and get this fired up while we're on our break. So you saw in last week's episode where we replaced the clutch disc on our input shaft. Then we also found, in tearing into this thing, that the clutch discs were wrong. So the two floating clutch discs that are in here, not only were they the wrong discs, but you'll see in a second what they're supposed to look like. These actually had the holes in them where they were riveted to a plate. Someone had either cut this to get it on, or maybe it broke in usage because it isn't the right one. This is what they're supposed to look like. These discs right here. So we're going to put two new discs in this. We're getting some of our plates cleaned up. You can see in this one here, and then we're going to start putting all this back together. So you'll get to see that, and then we'll get the engine back in and see if we can get this thing fired off. Alright, so there's our flywheel, pretty cleaned, sanded, and ready for the clutch rings to go in. So these are called clutch rings. There's two of them, and they're floating. It's going to fit down inside like that, and then we're going to have our clutch plate, or clutch disc rather is what they call it. That's been cleaned and sanded. It goes in next, and then the next thing that's going to go in is another clutch disc. Okay, now the next clutch disc is going to go in. It goes in on top of that. So there's two floating discs that operate the clutch on this, and then our thrust ring and the pressure plate, or what they is going to go in next. So we've got most of it back together. This is the bell crank, all put back together with the clutch cover. You can see I've got all the ends of these greased. That's where it's going to apply pressure to what we would call a pressure plate, and that piece is in there. What that does is that rides against these ramps here, and that's what, as it goes up the ramps, that's what applies pressure against those clutch discs, and then to hold it tight, and then when we release it to go down the ramp, then it takes pressure off of it so that we can disengage the transmission or change gears. So this is going together pretty well. We want to put the clutch cover and everything back together on it, and then we'll be ready to put the engine back. So with the shaft back in place and everything cleaned and greased, it's time to push the engine back in the frame and get that coupler hooked back up. A little tough to do by myself, but I got the majority of it lined up. My girlfriend came out and helped me put the pins in and all the shims to get it lined back up. The coupler's back in place, and now it'll be about ready for a clutch adjustment. Tighten everything down, start putting it all back together. So I got a clutch released right now, and I'm blocking it off with this piece of wood as it calls for. So that takes the pressure off of the clutch, so it's disengaged. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take a hammer, and that's what the directions call for, is to take a hammer and hit these two adjusting pieces for the clutch. And what that's going to do, by spiraling it, it's going to add more, or take some of the tension off of the bell crank, so that we can get the clutch adjustment correct until we get a ½ inch gap between this brake clutch and the disc, and then that'll be the adjustment for the clutch. Alright, so the engine's locked down, the hand crank's back on it. Now we're going to lift the radiator up in place. Alright, the radiator's back in place. Got our top and bottom hoses tight. The shield for the clutch cover, or the cover for the clutch rather, is back in place, and it's pretty much just a stanchion for the fuel tank, which I'm about to put on now. Alright, so the idea here is now that we've got everything back together, coolant's in it, gas is on, fingers crossed. Let's see if we can get this thing to fire off and move. It did run already, so that shouldn't be an issue. The issue was couldn't get it in gear to move once it was started. So if we can get it started, I'm going to pull it forward a little bit just to make sure that I can get it in gear. It works. So as you saw, it started up and it moved, so that's what we were looking for. The carburetor is a bit of an issue now. It's not the original carburetor on it. Someone has replaced it with something a little more current because they run better supposedly with that type of carburetor, but I don't think it's quite set up right. So we're going to pull that carburetor off and go through it, make sure everything's okay there, get the adjustments set correctly so we can get this thing to idle down so we can get in and out of gear even easier, and it'll be a better machine to operate.
Next time on Bulldog Builds, I'm going to decide which one of these two carburetors I want to put on the Cletrac. I'll give you a tour of some of my farm tractors and my motorcycles, including the one that's sitting in my living room. And I'm going to begin body and paint work on this 4,500 horsepower pull tractor. See you next week.